The next match, we've got Farouk and Bradshaw here. They're going to regain the WWF Tag Team titles from the Hardy Boys. They're actually teaming with Michael Hayes here. So it becomes a 2-on-3 affair. They go 9 minutes and 32 seconds. I know we all think the world of the APA. Of course, the Hardys are on their way up the cards. They're going to be bona fide stars. I mean, the match they're going to have in a couple of months is going to make them legends in the WWE. Of course, I'm talking about No Mercy 99 in October. But this moment here, where they're teaming with Michael Hayes on a pay-per-view, talk to me about the type of ribbing that Michael Hayes was getting from you guys in the office about him being in the ring on pay-per-view in 1999 with these young bucks known as the Hardy Boys.
We couldn't resist it. It was too easy. It was too easy, Connie. And Michael was a good sport and all that stuff. And the bottom line is, after a hiatus of months and months, he was back on television, and he hadn't forgotten a thing. He was very good. Michael Hayes has a great wrestling mind, and the only issue there is that his body was only going to allow him to do so much, so often, and I was skeptical of Michael being back in the ring at that point in time of his career, but I applauded us trying to make it work. And I know that it made Michael happy to get back in the game.
Let's talk a little bit about Michael Hayes for a minute, because I don't think enough people recognize or realize this. This is technically his last match. Now, I know he's going to have a non-televised event, an independent event in 2000 for the Hardy Boys versus the Fabulous Freebirds, which will be Michael Hayes and Terry Gordy. That's not televised, but that's technically his last real match. But this is the last one that we see on a national stage outside of that gimmick battle royal that he did at WrestleMania 17.
All right.
And what's interesting is, even as you're describing Michael Hayes getting back in the ring, there's this question about, well, can his body hold up and blah, blah, blah. My man's 40 years old here.
Yeah.
I just find it interesting how our perception of age in wrestling continues to evolve and change. Like years prior to 1999, you had people wrestling in their 50s and 60s. And now we see a lot of the main eventers that we see on television week in, week out are in their 50s. Hell, Sting was in his 60s, and he had a phenomenal match earlier this year. Time is kind of a funny thing in that regard, is it not?
Yeah, and it's too much is made of age. If you can still perform at the acceptable level, age should have nothing to do with anything. Did you have a good outing? Did you entertain the fans? Did you tell a good story? Did you take good crisp bumps, but only on a limited basis? So they meant more. Then there you go. But I was happy for Michael, because Michael's a natural born performer, and I was very happy he got his opportunity to get another hug, so shall we say, in a WWF or WWE ring, and it was good. I thought it was always decent television. He was too smart. He didn't put himself into his position, Conrad, that made it look awkward or a step off or what have you. He's just one of the great performers of all time is Michael Hayes.
Next up, we've got D'Lo Brown winning the European title from Midian. They go 7 minutes and 11 seconds. We haven't spent a lot of time talking about it, but without the British Bulldog there, does the European title make much sense? I mean,
Not really. It added a title match to your card. Was the title viable and hot and smoldering hot? Not really. Bulldog was kind of built for Bulldog, around Bulldog, and not for Midian and D'Lo. And I like both those guys a lot. They were good locker room guys. They worked hard. I was glad to have them on our team. But the European title was, it kind of ran its course.
When it was for British Bulldog, it made sense. If it was on William Regal, I could get behind it. But when it's D'Lo and Midian, it's like, what are we doing? This doesn't feel authentic, if that makes sense.
No, it does make sense, and you're right. It didn't feel authentic. It didn't feel fresh. It didn't feel new. So, but I was glad both those guys got a payday. I knew that their match would be good, probably not great, but good, solid, and I think that they fulfilled that scenario. It was, but the European title had seen its best days.
Let's talk a little bit about the next match here. It's Big Boss Man and Al Snow for the hardcore title. This has been pretty much the same match that we see on every pay-per-view. There's lots of weapons and brawling and things like that. And we were seeing this pretty consistently in this era. Maybe it's the ECW influence. What do you think of the hardcore title and, them brawling all over the arena and in the backstage area? Was it just par for the course at the time? Did you feel like it was passe, or were you a fan of this?
I think that ship had sailed a little before we set it free. Enough's enough. And both those guys are excellent workers. They did a good job. Boss Man was kind of getting back in the groove of being utilized in a significant level. And Al was very underrated. One of the more underrated performers that we had on our roster. So I think it ran its course. You can only hit somebody with a frying pan or a trash can lid or whatever so many times before it starts losing its potency. So it ain't like blue blue chew. It's not that. Enough's enough. And but I was glad those guys got a chance to dance on a big stage. They're both veterans. They deserve the opportunity to perform on that level. And even though the gimmick was a little bit worn, those guys worked their ass off to make it as good as they could.
Let's I love the work at the time. I can say as a fan who was a big fan of ECW at the time, I could see this was, hey, we're going to try to pacify that interest. But I still enjoyed it. It was different. It felt like a break, but maybe too much of it at times was a little silly.
I agree.
Next up, we've got Big Show and Kane. They're going to go 8 minutes and 13 seconds. Bob Holly was a riot as a special ref doing the Barney Fife to Big Show's Andy Griffith routine. That's the way Dave Meltzer reported it here. What do you think of the idea of putting these two big giants together? This feels a little old school. Like I, as a fan, have grown to realize that I enjoy the David versus Goliath story inside of a match. I want a big man and a little man. I think they can do fun stuff together. But on paper, when you see these old posters from yesteryear, two big giants, boy, that does look appealing. What do you think of the idea of pitting giants together? And what do you think of this particular presentation of Kane and Big Show?
Well, I thought the match was a little long. Both attraction guys, 2 7-footers, 300 pounds each or more. I thought it was challenging for those guys, and I think that we gave them too much time to quote unquote fill, and it didn't come off good at the end. And I love both those guys. I signed both guys. I recruited both guys. I really have great respect for Big Show and for Kane.